Hello, this is Todd. I am coming out of St. Petersburg, Russia. There's a phrase that I heard quite often when I was younger, and I'm sure many of you have heard the same thing, or the equivalent in your own native languages if English isn't your first language, which is this: it's not always greener on the other side. What we mean by that is that there's this notion that people have a sense of optimism and that it's misled. It's not necessarily that based on reason. And I think this can be true to a certain extent, but not completely. More specifically, I am referring to the environment that many young men now in the West are facing. You look at the situation with the dating. I've gone into some of the statistics about the odds as far as trying to obtain a relationship, the kind of setup that the government has going. The Western states are essentially set up with such a myriad of laws and taxes that you're a default prisoner. Now, of course, they can brand it as a form of freedom in terms of you being able to have free movement and things of this nature, but in many ways, you are a prisoner, especially by old standards. You are compelled to pay a large percentage of your taxes to a system that absolutely cannot stand you. You are subservient to the wills of a malevolent elite, and you are often not given any kind of real voice or say in the matter. Now, the location factor for many guys, I think, is often not looked into as far as dating, marriage, things like this. Of course, there are general patterns and tendencies that people in any country can display. You always have people that have characteristics that are more social and others that are more antisocial. Even within certain areas, professions, you have some people that might be considered a little more desirable. I mean, not necessarily how they look, but as far as communication or to work with, and others who aren't. With dating specifically, is that if you go to countries of the West, it is such an atrocious dating scene that you can't even get to the phase of trying to even court or even begin a relationship or even begin dating, because it doesn't even go beyond maybe small talk. You can reach the first stage and that is it. And this is the reality that we have going in many of the Western countries, and it puts guys in a very disadvantageous situation where they are having to compete against the state, which is a very big obstacle. If it's you against the state has the monopoly. The state will win. And so it brings up another question, which is, how can we confront this? Well, there's a way we can confront this, which is we can vote with our feet. We can move to a different country. And I know that many might say, well, people are people and situation won't necessarily change. I say that's not the case. I have moved and the situation for me has changed quite drastically. And I think for many young men out there who are feeling enslaved and trapped in places like Canada, the USA, countries of this nature, unless they have tried making this sort of change, they really don't know. It's always interesting too when I encounter guys here, I live in Russia, who have lived in the West, and it's not all bad what they say. Of course, there are certain advantageous factors, but in many cases, the guys do end up leaving. They might stay for a period of time, and as I said, there are things that they like, but overall, they feel that it's not necessarily a society that best represents them, and they may feel closer to the homelands they come from, and they would like to be in a country that they identify with as their own. But often something that gets brought up is how atrocious the social scene is. Dating, the way that people are treated, the way that Western countries have essentially sold out their societies to foreigners who really have no skin in the game. It's much easier if you're a foreigner in a country and things go south because you can just leave. If you are a domestic citizen in that country, and especially if you're not of a certain category where you'll be given special privileges elsewhere, you're essentially trapped in that country. You have nowhere to go. So for those who might be wanting a better options, better environment, I cannot state it with more emphasis that you must leave leave. This is a crucial factor, I think, that's holding a lot of people back, is that if they looked more into this, looked at other options, they might see that they could have better opportunities for social life, for dating, and maybe even for a career. For me, it's worked out in every dimension imaginable. I'm actually doing better here economically, in my social life, in every metric possible. I'm doing better here than I was ever doing in America. And I think we're reaching a point where coming from America isn't necessarily an advantage. In fact, it can actually be a disadvantage. And I would say in my case, it was a disadvantage. I'll go more into that in another day, but I'll just say this, is that America is no longer a meritocracy. It's a country that is built on just a whole myriad of like laws and norms that essentially accommodate to Marxism, and there's really no kind of real justice system. The courts are essentially kangaroo courts. People go to court and they have no real chance as far as like if they're in a divorce or any number of situations. And then we see how this plays out with individuals who are trying to do business, start a small business, and you might have the government breathing down you. They might say you don't pay enough taxes, and then you could face prison time because the IRS says they didn't get their fair share. There's so many different possibilities. It's not a fair system anymore, and it's not a meritocracy. And then to make matters worse, you have the very few who are at the very top, and they are really calling the shots. So just like in prison, you have the shot callers, the guys who are really saying what is allowed and what you can and can't do, and often that does not adhere to the written rules of the prison. And it's the same way in America as far as what is claimed to be permitted within the legal system and how the laws are written. It would seem that it was a system that's very tolerant and promotes individualism, free speech, but you see that it's actually anything but, at least nowadays. So if you have any doubt, I cannot emphasize enough, just leave. Like, at least try it out. Go to a different country. The countries I would personally recommend would be like Russia, Belarus. I lived in Argentina. It was nice. A couple issues there, but it depends on what you want. It's not the same for every individual. So just keep that in mind. Location is a very significant factor nowadays.